Bhishma Nirvana by Dr. Nilesh Oak. Chapter 3. Chronology Evidence. What can be asserted without an evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Christopher Hitchens. The Mahabharata text contains enormous evidence related to the chronology narrative of Bhishma Nirvana. The linear narration of events that begin with the fall of Bhishma on 10th day of the war runs through Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Shalya, Sauptik, Stri, Shanti and Anushasan Parvas, leading to the day of Bhishma Nirvana. I had begun with 6 quantitative and chronological references for Bhishma Nirvana and thought they were crisp and clean and more than sufficient to conclusively establish the duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows. To my amazement, I underestimated the extension of delusion, intellectual rot, and dishonesty and sheer laziness of the Mahabharata researchers. These researchers were either incompetent or outright frauds. They were incapable and unwilling to reach the factual conclusions even when I made available overwhelming amount of evidence from the Mahabharata text. It was then interesting to note that as they raised trivial sounding objections against the factual timeline of Bhishma Nirvana, and as I read and reread the Mahabharata text trying to respond to their objections, I unearthed enormous additional evidence. If I must quote all of it, it would amount to quoting entire parvas of the Mahabharata texts. For brevity, we will limit ourselves to minimum necessary evidence that clearly outlines the narration of Bhishma Nirvana in the quantitative fashion. One can clearly states the sequence of events. 3.1 Fall of Bhishma to Bhishma Nirvana. Bhishma fell in the battle on the 10th day of the war and since then was lying on the bed of arrows until the day of winter solstice. The war continued for additional 8 days, total of 18 days. And by the time the war was over, Bhishma was already on the bed of arrows for 9 days. The war appeared to have ended with the fall of Duryodhana during the Duryodhana Bhima Gadayuddha on the 18th day of the war. Ashwathama asked fallen Duryodhana to make him the military general of the Kaurava side and then went to the Pandava camp at night along with Kripacharya and Kritavarma, where he killed 5 sons of Draupadi, Drishtadyumna, Shikhandi and many other warriors of Pandava side. The next day, that is the day after the 18th day of the war, Bhima and Arjuna humbled Ashwathama and then returned to Hastinapura. This is when all the Kuru women arrived at the battlefield in search of the bodies of their loved ones. Yudhishthira asked Vidura, Daumya, Sanjaya, Yuyutsu, Indrasen and others to plan the Preta Karma of the fallen warriors. Stri Parva CE 26, 24-26, GP 26, 24-26. Evamukto Mahapradnyah Kuntiputro Yudhishthira Adidesha Sudharmanam Daumyam Sutam Sanjayam Vidurancha Mahabuddhim Yuyutsum Chaiva Kauravam Indrasena Mukhaschaiva Bhrutyan Sutanscha Sarvashah Bhavanta Karyan Pesham Preta Karyani Sarvashah Yatha Chanathavat Kinchit Shariram Na Vinashyati. Vidura and others conducted the Preta Kriya accordingly and the palace became bright with Preta Kriya of thousands of dead warriors. Stri Parva CE 26, 27-38, GP 26, 27-38. Shasanadharma Rajasya Kshata Sutascha Sanjaya Sudharma Dhaumya Sahita Indrasena Dayastata Chandana Guru Kashtani Tatha Kaliya Kanyata Ghrutam Tailancha Gandhanscha Kshaumani Vasananicha Samarudya Maharhani Darunam Chaiva Sanchayat Rathascha Mruditantatra Nana Prahara Nanicha Chitaha Krutva Prayatnena Yatha Mukhyan Radhipan Dahaya Masura Vyagra Vidhi Drushtena Karmana Duryodhanancha Rajanam Bhratruschaschya Shatadikan Shalam Shalam cha Rajanam Bhuri Shrava Samevacha Jayadrathancha Rajanam Abhimanyum cha Bharata Daushasanim Lakshmanancha Drushtaketum cha Parthivam Bruhantam Somadattascha Srujayanscha Shatadikan राजानक्षेम धन्वानं विराट द्रुपदौ तथा शिखण्डीनं च पाञ्चाल्य दृष्टद्युम्नं च पार्षदं युधामन्युश्च विक्रान्तम् उत्तमौज समेव च कौसल्यं द्रौपदेयाश्च शकुनिं चाम्प सौबलम् अचलं वृषकं चैव भगदत्तं च पार्थिवं कर्णं वैकर्तनं चैव सहपुत्रम् अकर्षणं केकयांश्च महेश्वासां स्त्रीगर्ताश्च महारथान् घटोत्कचं राक्षसेन्द्र बकभ्रातमेव च अलम्बूसं च राजानं जलसन्धं च पार्थिवम् अन्याञ्च पार्थिवात्रा जश्चोत सहस्रशः धृतधाराहुते दृप्ते पावके समदाहयन्. Pitrumedha began for key warriors and sounds of samagana could be heard. The night was filled with the sounds of samagana and the wailing of Kuru women. Stri Parva CE 26 39 to 40 and GP 26 39 to 40. शासनात् धर्मराजस्य तत्तासूतश्च संजयः सुधर्माधौम्य सहित इंद्रसेनादयस्ततः चितः कृत्वा प्रयत्नेन यथा मुख्यान् राधिपान् दाहयामासुरव्यग्रा विधिदृष्टेन कर्मणा पितृमेधाश्च केशाश्चिद वर्तन्त महात्मनाम् सामभिश्चाप्य गायन्त तेन्वशोच्यन्त चापरै साम्नां रुचाञ्च नादेन स्त्रीणाञ्च रुदित स्वनैः कश्मलं सर्वभूतानां निशायां समपद्यता. Vidura ordered Pretakriya for the bodies of numerous unknown warriors who had arrived from distant places to participate in the war. Stri Parva CE 26 42 to 43 GP 26 40 to 43. Ye chapyanathaस्तत्र सन्नाना देश समागतः ताश्च सर्वान् समानाय्य राशिन् कृत्वा सहस्रशः चित्वा दारुभिर्व्यग्रः प्रभूतै स्नेहता पितैः दाहयामास विदुरो धर्मराजस्य शासनात्. After completing Pretakriya, Yudhishthira left for the bank of Ganga along with Dhritarashtra and others. Stri Parva CE 26:44 and GP 26:44. Karayitva kriyastesham कुरुराजो युधिष्ठिरः धृतराष्ट्रं पुरस्कृत्य गंगामभिमुखो गमत्. They arrived on the bank of river Ganga and then began the Pretakriya by entering the waters of Ganga river. Stri Parva CE 27:1 and 2 GP 27:1 and 2. Samasadya Gangam tu Shivam Punyajano Chitam Rudini Vapra Sampannam Mahanupam Mahavanam भूषणान्नत उत्तरयाणि वेष्टनान्य वमुच्च भूषणान्य उत्तरयाणि वेष्टनान्यवमुच्च ततः पितॄणां पौत्राणां भ्रातॄणां स्वजनस्य च. Yudhishthira invited the widows of Karna and along with them performed Pretakriya for Karna and then came out of the water of Ganga river to its bank. Stri Parva CE 27:23 to 24 GP 27:23 to 24. तत आनाययामास कर्णस्य सपरिच्छदं स्त्रियाः कुरुपतिर्धिमान् भ्रान्तुः प्रेम्णा युधिष्ठिरः सताभिः सह धर्मात्मा प्रेतकृत्यमनन्तरं कृत्वोत्तार गंगाया सदीलादा कुलेन्द्रियाः. Yudhishthira and party thus completed Pretakriya in the waters of river Ganga and then stayed on the bank of Ganga seeking Atmashuddhi for a month. Shanti Parva CE 1:1 to 2 GP 1:1 to 2. कृतोदकास्ते सुरधां सर्वेषां पाण्डुनन्दनः विदुरो धृतराष्ट्रश्च सर्वाश्च भरत स्त्रियः तत्र ते सुमहात्मानो न्यवसन् कुरु नन्दनः शौचं निर्वर्तयिष्यन्तो मासमेकं बहि पुरात्. Sage Narada and Sage Vyasa discussed relevant narrations and responded to questions of Yudhishthira. They spent about a month on the bank of the river Ganga. We will estimate this duration of a month in the most conservative fashion, realizing that the actual duration could be longer but never shorter than the most conservative estimate. As a most conservative estimate, we would assume the duration to be equal to the length of sidereal lunar month, that is about 27 days. This means that by the time Yudhishthira had completed his stay on the bank of the river, Ganga. Bhishma was already on the bed of arrows for a minimum of 9 plus 27 days. When Yudhishthir asked both sages to expound on the conflicting reality of following dharma and administration of the kingdom, Vyasa suggested that it is better that Yudhishthira seek his counsel from Bhishma. Shanti Parva CE 38 5-6 GP 37 5-6 तमुवाच महातेजा व्यासो वेदविदान् वरः नारदं सम अभिप्रेक्ष्य सर्वं जानन् पुरातनम् श्रोतृमिच्छसि चेद्धर्मान् किलेन युधिष्ठिरः प्रैहि भीष्म महाबाहो वृद्धं कुरु पितामहम्. Vyasa added that Bhishma is an expert in the subject of subtleties of dharma and artha, and that Yudhishthira should approach Bhishma before the latter passes away. Shanti Parva CE 38:16 and GP 37:16 Sate vakshati dharmajnah sukshma dharmartha tatvid tamabhehi pura pranans vimuchanti dharma vitah. Yudhishthira listened to this advice of sage Vyasa and decided to leave the bank of the river Ganga and travel towards Hastinapura and entered the city. Shanti Parva CE 38:30 GP 37:30 सतैः परिवृतो राजा नक्षत्रैरिव चन्द्रमः धृतराष्ट्रं पुरस्कृत्यं स्वपुरं प्रविवेशः. The residents of Hastinapura welcomed Yudhishthira and his entourage with great celebration. Shanti Parva CE 38 31-49 and GP 37 31-49 प्रविवेक्षुः सधर्मज्ञः कुन्तीपुत्रो युधिष्ठिरः अर्चयामास देवांश्च ब्राह्मणांश्च सहस्रशः ततो रथं नवं शुभ्रं कम्बलाजिनसंवृतं युक्तं षोडशभिगर्भोभिः पाण्डुरः शुभलक्षणः मन्त्रैरभ्यर्चितः पुण्ये स्तूयमानो महर्षिभिः आरुरोह यथा देवः सोमो मृतमयं रथं जग्राह रश्मिन् कौन्तेयो भीमो भीमपरक्रमः अर्जुनः पाण्डुरं छत्रं धारयामास भानुमत द्रियमाणं तु तच्छत्रं पाण्डुरं तस्य मूर्धनि शुशुभे तारका राजसितम भ्रमिवाम्बरे चामरव्यजने चास्य वीरौ जगृह तुस्तदा चन्द्ररश्मिप्रभे शुभ्रे माद्रिपुत्रा वलङ्कते ते पञ्चरथमास्थाय भ्रातरः समलङ्कृता भूतानीव समस्तानि राजन्ददृशिरे तदा अस्थाय तु रथं शुभ्रं युक्तमैश्वर्यमहाजवैः अन्वयात् पृष्ठतो राजन् युयुत्सः पाण्डवाग्रजं रथं हेममयं शुभ्रं सैन्यसुग्रीवयोजितं सह सात्यकिना कृष्णः समस्तायान्वयात् कुरुन् नरयानेन तु ज्येष्ठपिता पार्थस्त भारत ततो वैतालिकैः सूतैर्मागधैश्च सुभाषितैः स्तूयमानो ययो राजा नगरं नागसारयम् तत्प्राणं महाबाहोर्बभुवा प्रतिवं भुवि अकुलाकुलमुत्सृष्टं हृष्टपुष्टजनान्वितम् अभियाने तु पार्थस्त नरैन नगरावाभिसि नगरं राजमार्गस्य यथा वत्सलमकृतं पाण्डुरेण च माल्येन पताकाभिश्च वेदिभिः संवृतो राजमार्गश्च धूपनैश्च सुधूपिताः अथ चूर्णेन गन्धानां नानापुष्पैः प्रियङ्भूमिः माल्यदामभिरासक्तै राजवेश्माभिसंवृतम् कुम्भाश्च नगरद्वारी वारिपूर्णा दृढा नवः कन्याः सुमनश्चागाः स्थापितास्तत्र तत्रः तथा स्वलङ्कृतं द्वारं नगरं पाण्डुनन्दनः स्तूयमानः शुभैर्वाक्यैः प्रविवेश सुरुद्रतः. Yudhishthira was corroborated as a king. Shanti Parva CE 40 1-22 GP 41-24 ततः कुंती सुतो राजा गतर्मन्युर्गतज्वरः कांचने प्राङ्मुखो दृष्टो नशीदत्पर मानसे तमेवाभिमुखौ पीठे सेविस्तरण संवृत्ते सात्यकीर्वा सुदेवश्च निशीदतुररिदं मौ मध्ये कृत्वा तु राजानं भीमसेनार्जुन बुभौ निशीदर्तु महात्मानौ क्षण्ययोर्मणि पीठयो दान्ते शय्यासने शुभ्रे दाम्बुनद विषभुते पृथापि सहदेवेन सहास्ते नकुले च सुधर्मा विदुरो धौम्यो दृष्टराष्ट्रश्च कौरवः निषेधोज्ज्वलनाकारे श्वासनेषु पृथक् पृथक् युयुत्सः सञ्जयश्चैव गान्धारी च यशस्विनी धृतराष्ट्रो यतो राजा ततः सर्व उपाविशन् तत्रोपविष्टो धर्मात्मा श्वेतः सुमनसोऽस्पृशत् स्वस्तिकानक्षतान् भूमिं सुवर्णं रजतं मणिं ततः प्रकृतयः सर्वः पुरस्कृत्य पुरोहितं ददृशुर्धर्मराजानमादाय बहुमङ्गलं पृथिवीञ्च सुवर्णञ्च रत्नानि विविधानि च आभिषेकचनिकं भाण्डं सर्वसंभारसंभृतं काञ्चनौदुम्बरास्तत्र राजतः पृथ्वीः मयः पूर्णकुम्भः सुमनसो लाजा बहिर्षि गोरसः शमीपलाशपुन्नाङ्गाः समिधो मधुसर्पिषि दृढपादप्रतिष्ठाने हुताशन समत्विषि उपवेश्य महात्मानं कृष्णानां च द्रुपदात्मजां जुहाव पावकं धीमान् विधिं मन्त्र पुरस्कृतम् अभ्यशिश्चत्पतिं पृथ्व्या कुन्तिपुत्रं युधिष्ठिरं धृतराष्ट्रश्च राजर्षिः सर्वः प्रकृतयस्तथा ततोऽनुवादयामासुः पणवानकदुन्दुभिः धर्मराजोऽपि तत्सर्वं प्रतिजग्राह धर्मतः पूजयामास तांश्चापि विधिवद्भुरिदक्षिणः ततो निष्कसहस्रेण ब्राह्मणान् स्वति वाचयत् वेदाध्ययन सम्पन्ना शीलवृत्तसमन्वितान् ते प्रीता ब्राह्मणा राजन्स्वस्त्युचुर्जयमेव च हंसा इव च नर्दन्तः प्रशंसु युधिष्ठिरम् युधिष्ठिरमहाबाहो दिष्ट्या जयसि पाण्डव दिष्ट्या स्वधर्मं प्राप्तोऽसि विक्रमेण महाद्युते दिष्ट्या गाण्डीवधन्वा च भीमसेनश्च पाण्डवः त्वं चापि कुशली राजन्माद्रिपुत्रो च पाण्डवो मुक्ता वीरक्षयादस्मान् सङ्ग्रामान्नि हतद्विषः क्षिप्रमुत्तरकालानि कुरु कार्याणि पाण्डवः ततः प्रत्यर्चितः सद्भिर्धर्मराजो युधिष्ठिरः प्रतिपेदे महद्राज्यं सुहृदिः सह भारत Yudhishthira took leave of his audience who attended his coronation ceremony and appointed Bhima as the Yuvraj. He appointed Vidura as his counselor and assigned duties related to collection of revenue as well as execution of administrative tasks to Sanjaya. Yudhishthira assigned Nakula to all aspects of army management and Arjuna as the military chief. He assigned Dhaumya as his dharma counselor and Sahadeva as the head of his personal security. He requested Vidura, Sanjaya and Yuyutsu to take good care of Dhritarashtra and address the concerns of residents of Hastinapura and his kingdom. Shanti Parva CE 41 1-18 GP 41 1-19 अनुगम्य च राजानं यथेष्टं गम्यतामिति पौरजानपदान् सर्वान् विसृज्य कुरुनन्दनः यौवराज्येन कौरव्यो भीमसेनमयोजत् मन्त्रे च निश्चये चैव शाङ्गुण्यस्य चिन्तने विदूरं बुद्धिसम्पन्नं प्रीतिमान्वे समादिशत् कृताकृत्यपरिज्ञाने यथाय व्यय चिन्तने सञ्जय योजयामास वृद्ध मृद्धे गुणे र्युतं बलस्य परिमाणे च भक्तवेतनयोस्तथा नकुलं व्यादिशद्राजा कर्मिणाम्बवेक्षणे परचक्रोपरोधे च द्रुप्तानां चावमर्दने युधिष्ठिरो महाराजः फल्गुनं व्याधिदेशः द्विजानां वेदकार्येषु कार्येष्वनेषु चैव हि धौम्यं पुरोधसा श्रेष्ठं व्याधिदेश परन्तपः सहदेवं समीपस्थं नित्यमेव समादिशत् तेन गौप्यो हि नृपतिः सर्वावस्थो विशाम्पते यान्यानमन्यद्योग्यांश्च येषु येष्विह कर्मसु तांस्ते श्वेव युयुजे प्रियमाणो महीपतिः विदूरं सञ्जयं चैव युयुत्सं च महामतिं अब्रवीत्परवीरग्नो धर्मात्मा धर्मवत्सलः उत्थायोत्थाय यत्कार्यमस्य राज्ञः पितुर्मम सर्वं भवद्भिः कर्तव्यं यथा तथं पौरजानपदानाञ्च यानि कार्याणि नित्यशः राजानं समनुज्ञाप्य तानि कार्याणि धर्मतः. Yudhishthira conducted Shraddha Karma along with Dhritarashtra and then honored Krishna. He assigned at the request of Dhritarashtra the palace of Duryodhana to Bhimasen, Dushasana's palace to Arjuna, Durmashana's palace to Nakula and Duramukha's palace to Sahadeva. Yuyutsu, Vidura, Sanjaya, Sudharma and Dhaumya continued with their existing residences. Shanti Parva CE 44:6-14 GP 44:6-14 Tato Duryodhana Gruham Prasadairupa Bahuratnam Samakirnam Dasidasa Samakulam Dhritarashtra Byanudyatam Bhratra Dantam Vrukodaraha Pratipede Mahabahur Mandaram Madhavaniva Yatha Duryodhana Gruham तथा दुःशासनस्य च प्रासादमालां संयुक्तं हेमतोरणभूषितं दासीदाससुसम्पूर्णं प्रभूतधनधान्यवत् प्रतिपेदे महाबाहुर्जुनो राजशासनात् दुर्मर्शनस्य भवनं दुःशासनगृहाद्वरं कुबेरभवनं प्रख्यं मणिहेम विभूषितं नकुलाय वरार्हार्य कर्षिताय महावने ददौ प्रीतो महाराज धर्मराजो युधिष्ठिरः दुर्मुखस्यश्च वेश्माग्र्यं श्रीमत्कनकभूषितं पूर्णं पद्मदलाक्षीणां स्त्रीणां शयनसङ्कुलं प्रददौ सहदेवाय सततं प्रियकारिणे मुमुदे तच्च लब्ध्वास कैलासं धनदो यथा युयुत्सुर्विदुरश्चैव सञ्जयश्च महाद्युतिः सुधर्मा चैव धौम्यश्च यथास्वं जगमुरालयान्. Krishna went to the palace of Arjuna along with Satyaki and spent the night. When they were well rested for the night, they woke up in the morning, became ready and then went to see Yudhishthira. Shanti Parva CE 44:15-16 GP 44:15-16 Sahasatyakina Shaurirarjunasya Niveshanam विवेश पुरुष व्याघ्रो गिरिगुहामिव तत्र भक्षान्नपान्नैस्ते समुपेतः सुखोषितः सुखप्रबुद्धः राजान्मुपतस्थु युधिष्ठिरम्. Yudhishthira welcomed Krishna, asked Krishna of his well-being, and yet he noticed that Krishna was in some deep thought. Shanti Parva CE 45:17-20 GP 45:17-20 Sukhena nisha kachchida vyushta buddhimattamvar kachchidjnanani sarvani prasannani tavachyata tavayashrityatam devim buddhim buddhimatavaram vayam rajyamanupraptah prithvi cha vashe stitha bhavat prasadat bhagavant sri loka gati vikram जयः प्राप्तो यशश्चाग्रं न च धर्माच्युता वयं तं तथा भाषमाणं तु धर्मराजं युधिष्ठिरं नोवाच भगवान् किश्चित् ध्यानमेवान्पद्यत. When Yudhishthira asked Krishna as to what he was thinking about, Krishna responded that Bhishma, who is lying on the bed of arrows, is thinking of him and therefore he is also thinking of Bhishma. Krishna reminded Yudhishthira that Bhishma, who was lying on the bed of arrows, would soon pass away, and that Yudhishthira should approach Bhishma and ask all the questions. Shanti Parva CE 46:11 GP 46:11 Sharatalpagato Bhishma Shamyanniv Hutashanah Mam Dhyati Purusha Vyaghra Stato Me Tadvatam Manaha. Shanti Parva CE 46:20-23 GP 46:20-23 तस्मिन् पुरुषव्याघ्रे कर्मभिः स्वैर्दिवं गते भविष्यति महीपार्थ नष्टचन्द्रेव शर्वरि तद्युधिष्ठिर गांगेय भीष्म भीम पराक्रमम् अभिगम्योपसंगृह्य पृच्छ यत्ते मनोगतं चातुर्वेद चातुर्होत्रं चातुराश्रममेव च चातुर्वर्ण्यं चातुर्वर्णस्य धर्मञ्च पृच्छेन पृथिवीपते तस्मिन्नस्तमिते भीष्मे कौरवाणां दुरन्दरे ज्ञानानल्पि भविष्यन्ति तस्मात् त्वां चोदयाम्यहम्. Yudhishthira agreed with the suggestion of Krishna and assented. Shanti Parva CE 46 28 to 29, GP 46 28 and 29. Yatastvanu kruta buddhiste mayi madhav त्वामग्रतः पुरस्कृत्य भीष्मं पश्यामहे वयम् आवृत्ते भगवत्यर्के स हि लोकाङ्गमिष्यति त्वद्दर्शनं महाबाहो तस्माद्दर्हति कौरवः. Krishna asked Satyaki to have his chariot ready, and Satyaki in turn asked Daruka to have the chariot ready. Shanti Parva CE 46 31 and 32, GP 46 31 32. श्रुत्वैत धर्मराजस्य वचनं मधुसूदनः पार्श्वस्थं सात्यकीं प्राह रथो मे युज्यतामिति. सात्यकिस्तु पनिष्क्रम्य केशवस्य समीपतः दारुकं प्राह कृष्णस्य युज्यतां रथ इत्युत. Day of Bhishma Nirvana and the day of winter solstice. When King Janamejaya asked sage Vaishampayan about the timing of Bhishma Nirvana, Vaishampayan answered by stating that Bhishma passed away as soon as the sun turned north. Shanti Parva CE 47 1-3, GP 47 1-3. जनमेजय उवाच शरतल्ये शयानस्तु भरतानां पितामहः कथमसृष्टवान् देहं कञ्च योगमधारयत्. वैशम्पायन उवाच शृणुष्वावहितो राज शुचिर्भूत्वा समाहितः भीष्मस्य कुरुशार्दूल देहोत्सर्ग महात्मनः निवृत्तमात्रे त्वयन उत्तरे वै दिवाकरे समावेश यदात्मान मात्मनेव समाहितः. Krishna and Satyaki boarded on one chariot while Yudhishthira and Arjuna on the second chariot. Bhima, Nakula and Sahadeva boarded the third chariot while Kripacharya, Yuyutsu and Sanjaya boarded the fourth chariot. Shanti Parva CE 47 68 to 72, GP 47 105 to 109. Viditva Bhakti Yogam tu Bhishmasya Purushottamah Sahasotthaya संदृष्टो यानमेवान्वपद्यत. केशवः सात्यकिश्चैव रथेनै खेन जग्मतुः अपरेण महात्मानौ युधिष्ठिर धनञ्जयो भीमसेनो यमौ चौभौ रथमेकं समास्थितो कृपो युयुत्सुः सूतश्च सञ्जयाश्चापरं रथं ते रथैर्नगराकारै प्रयातः पुरुषर्षभः नेमिघोषेण महता कंपयन्तो वसुन्धरां ततो गिरः पुरुषवरस्तवान्वितः द्विजेरितः पतिसुमनाः शुश्रुवे कृताञ्जलि प्रणतमथा परं जनं स केशिः मुदितमनाभ्य नन्दत. They soon arrived at Kurukshetra. The place was filled with hair, bones and human skulls. They continued traveling to the location where Bhishma was lying on the bed of arrows. Shanti Parva CE 48 1-6, GP 48 1-6. ततः स च ऋषिकेशः स च राजा युधिष्ठिरः कृपादयश्च ते सर्वे चत्वारः पाण्डवाश्च रथैस्ते नगराकार्यैः पताकाध्वजशोभितैः ययुराशु कुरुक्षेत्रं वाजिभिः शीघ्रगामिभिः ते वर्तीय कुरुक्षेत्रं केशमज्जास्थितसङ्कुलं देहन्यासः कृतो यत्र क्षत्रियैस्तैर्महात्मभिः गजाश्च देहास्तिचयैः पर्वतैरिव सञ्चितं नरशीर्षकपालैश्च शङ्कैरिव समाचितं चितासहस्रैर्निर्चितं वर्मशस्त्रं समाकुलम् आपानभूमिकाल्यस्य तदा भुक्तो जितामिव भूतसञ्चानुच्चरितं रक्षोगणनिषेवितं पश्यन्तस्ते कुरुक्षेत्रं युयुराशु महारथः. Soon they arrived near Bhishma, who was lying on the bank of Oghavati river, surrounded by many sages. Shanti Parva CE 50:5-7, GP 50:5-7. तथा यान्तौ तदा तात तावच्युत युधिष्ठिरौ जग्मतुर्यत्र गाण्डेय शरतल्प गतः प्रभु ततस्ते ददृशुर्भीष्मं शरप्रस्तरशायिनं स्वरश्मिजालसवितं सायं सूर्यमिवानलम् उपास्यमानं मुनिभिर्दैवैर्शतकृतं देशे परमधर्मिष्ठे नदीम् ओघवतीं मनु. When they saw Bhishma, they came down from their chariots, still at a distance from Bhishma, and walked towards Bhishma and the sages, paid their obeisances to sages and Bhishma, and then sat down in a circle around Bhishma. Shanti Parva CE 50:8-11, GP 50:8-11. Dura devatamaalokya Krishno raja cha dharmaraj चत्वारः पाण्डवाश्चैव ते च शारद्वता दयः अवस्कन्द्याथ वाहेभ्यः संयम्य प्रचलं मनः एकीकृत्योन्द्रिय ग्राम मुपत स्थूर्महामुनिन् अभिवाद्य च गोविन्दः सात्यकिस्ते च कौरवः व्यासादिंस्तान्दृशि पश्चात् दाङ्गेय मुपत स्थिरे तपोवृद्धिं ततः पृष्ट्वा गाण्डेय यदु कौरवः परिवार्य ततः सर्वे निषेधुः पुरुषर्षभः. Krishna asked Bhishma about his health and told him the purpose of their visit. Krishna praised Bhishma as a person who knew Itihasa, Puranas and Dharmashastra and his skills at resolving doubts of others, and further requested him to remove the grief of Yudhishthira. Shanti Parva CE 50:34-36, GP 50:36-38. इतिहास पुराणञ्च कार्त्स्येन विदितं तव धर्मशास्त्रं च सकलं नित्यं मनसि ते स्थितं ये च केचन लोकेऽस्मिन् अर्थः संशयकारकः तेषां चेत्ता नास्ति लोके त्वदन्यः पुरुषर्षभ. शान्ति पर्व CE 50:34-36, GP 50:36-38. स पाण्डवे यस्य मनः समुत्थितं नरेन्द्रशोकं व्यपकर्षमेधया भवद्विधा ह्युत्तमबुद्धिविस्तराः विम्योहमानस्य जनस्य शान्तये. Bhishma in turn praised Krishna, and Krishna told Bhishma that the latter's study and austerity is sufficient to reach moksha. It is now that on this day Krishna told Bhishma that the latter had 56 more days to live. That is, the day of winter solstice was about 56 days away into the future, and he again requested Bhishma to impart knowledge to Yudhishthira. Shanti Parva CE 51:13-18, GP 51:13-18. Arhastam Bhishma mam drashtum tapasa svena parthiva तव यूपास्थिता लोका येभ्यो नावर्तते पुनः 50 षट च कुरु प्रवीरः शेषं दिनानां तव जीवितस्य ततः शुभैः कर्मफलोदयैस्त्वं समेष्यसे भीष्म विमुच्य देहम्. एते हि देवा वसवो विमानः न्यास्थाय सर्वे ज्वलिताग्निकल्पः अन्तर्हितास्त्वां प्रतिपालयन्ति काष्ठां प्रपद्यन्तमुदक्पतङ्गं व्यावृत्तमात्रे भगवत्युदीचि सूर्ये दिशं कालवशात् प्रपन्ने गतास्मि लोकान् पुरुषः प्रवीरा नावर्तते यानुपलभ्य विद्वान् अमुञ्च लोकं त्वयि भीष्म याते ज्ञानानि नक्ष्यन्तखिलेन वीर अतः स्म सर्वे त्वयि सन्निकर्ष समागता धर्मविवेचनाय तज्जातिशोकोपहतश्रुताय सत्याभिसन्धाय युधिष्ठिराय प्रब्रूहि धर्मार्थसभाधियुक्तः मर्त्यं वचो स्वापनुदास्य शोकम्. This narration of Bhishma Nirvana from the Mahabharata text conclusively proves the duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows to be that of 92 days. This duration of a minimum interval of 92 days between the 10th day of the war and the day of the winter solstice is of great importance in determining the chronology of Mahabharata war. However, before we do that, we must state additional evidence. And there is additional evidence that further corroborates the statement of Krishna when he told Bhishma that there were additional 56 days before Bhishma was going to pass away. This evidence allows us to determine the duration of Bhishma Yudhishthira Samvada when Bhishma advised Yudhishthira on aspects of Dharma, Rajadharma and Moksha Dharma. 3.2 Bhishma Yudhishthira Samvada. No researcher of the past has determined the duration of Bhishma Yudhishthira Samvada when Bhishma advised Yudhishthira on various aspects of Rajadharma and Moksha Dharma. Late Shri Gopal Nilkanth Dandekar, lovingly Gonida to Marathi readers, was the first to implicitly recognize total duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows as being greater than 92 days. It is worth recognizing that he was writing a summary of entire Mahabharata narration and was not at all focused on either determining or explaining chronology of Mahabharata events. I deliberately point out these findings of Gonida to illustrate that was what missed or deliberately ignored by Mahabharata researchers dedicated to chronology of Mahabharata events was casually identified by a writer focused on purely Mahabharata narration with no concern for chronology. We can estimate this duration to be equal to 6 days when Yudhishthira visited Bhishma every day from Hastinapura, listened to Bhishma's advice and then returned to Hastinapura at the end of the day. At the end of the 6th day, Bhishma asked Yudhishthira to go back to Hastinapura and not return until the sun had turned north, that is the day after the day of winter solstice. Upon this advice of Bhishma, Yudhishthira went back to Hastinapura, stayed there, and only returned to Bhishma at Kurukshetra when the sun turned north. 3.2.1 56th day before Bhishma Nirvana. As Yudhishthira, his brothers Krishna and Satyaki, Sanjaya, Yuyutsu and Kripacharya spent time in the company of the sages and Bhishma. Sun turned towards the western horizon and sages asked permission to leave, saying that they will return the next day. Yudhishthira and his party also asked permission of Bhishma to leave and boarded their chariots. The entourage of Yudhishthira with its chariots, horses and his soldiers looked like an east-west flowing river Narmada. As they marched towards Hastinapura, the moon rose in the sky and delighted everyone. They entered Hastinapura exhausted. Shanti Parva CE 52 26 to 34 GP 52 26 to 34. Tato muhurtat Bhagavan Sahasranshurdivakarah Dahanvanmi Vaikante Praticham Pratyadrushyata. Tato Maharshayah Sarve Samutthaya Janardanam Bhishma Mamatrayam Chakru Rajanam Cha Yudhishtiram. Tataha Pranamat Keshavah Pandavastata Satyakihi Sanjayaschaiva Sacha Sharadvatah Krupaha. Tataste Dharma Nirataha Samyaktaira Bhumi Pujitaha Shva Sameshyama Ityuktva Yateshtam Tvarita Yayuhu. Tathaiva Mantragandeyam Keshasvate cha Pandavaha Pradikshanamupavrutya Rathanaruruhu Shubhan. Tatho Ratehi Kanchana Danta Kubairehi Rmahidharabhehi Samadaischa Dantibihi Hayehe Suparnairivashashuga Bibihi Padati Vishchata Sharasana Dibihi Yayo Rathanam Purato Hisachamuhu Stataiva Paschadati Matrasareni Purascha Paschascha Yatha Mahanadi Purarkshavantam Girimetya Narmada. Tataha Purastat Bhagwan Nishakaraha Samuttitastam Abhiharshayam Shchamum Divakara Pitara Rasasta Aushadi Punaha Swakenaiva Gunena Yojayan. Tataha Puram Surapura Sannivadyutihi Pravishyate Yaduvrusha Pandavastada Yathochitan Bhavan Varan Samavishah Shchamanvita Mrugapatayo Guha Iva. 3.2.2 55th day before Bhishma Nirvana. Krishna slept on a comfortable bed and woke up early morning to complete his morning prayers. Shanti Parva CE 53 1 and 2, GP 53 1 and 2. ततः प्रविश्य भवनं प्रसुप्तो मधुसूदनः याममात्रावशेषायां यामिन्यां प्रत्यबुध्यत सद्यानपथमाश्रित्य सर्वज्ञानानि माधवः अवलोक्य ततः पश्चात् दध्यो ब्रह्मसनातनम्. When Krishna has completed his Prathak Karma, he asked Satyaki to check if Yudhishthira was ready. Satyaki conveyed the message to Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira asked Arjuna to have chariots ready and informed him of his decision to visit Bhishma without the entourage of soldiers to avoid inconvenience and disturbance to Bhishma. Yudhishthira also expressed his wish to avoid company of numerous others while visiting Bhishma by stating that Bhishma would be advising and counseling him on deeper secrets of Rajadharma and thus better to avoid presence of common folks. Shanti Parva CE 53 10 to 16, GP 53 10 to 16. Gaccha Shaineya Janihi Gatva Rajanivesanam अपि सज्जो महातेजा भीष्मं द्रष्टुं युधिष्ठिरा. ततः कृष्णस्य वचनात् सात्यकी त्वरितो ययो उपगम्य च राजानं युधिष्ठिरमुवाचः. युक्तरथवरो राजन् वासुदेवस्य धीमतः समीपमापगेयस्य प्रयास्यति जनार्दनः. भवत्प्रतीक्षः कृष्णोऽसौ धर्मराजमहाद्युते यदत्रानन्तरं कृत्यं तद्भवान् कर्तुमर्हति. युधिष्ठिर उवाच. युज्यन्ता मे रथवरः फल्गुना प्रतिमद्युते न सैनिकैश्च यातव्यं यास्यामो वयमेव हि न च पीडयितव्यो मे भीष्मो धर्मभृतांबरः अतः पुरस्सराश्चापि निवर्तन्तु धनञ्जय. अद्य प्रवृत्तिगाण्डेयः परं गुह्यं प्रवक्ष्यति ततो नेच्छामि कौन्तेय पृथग्जन समागमam. Yudhishthir, along with his brothers Krishna and Satyaki, left for Kurukshetra and soon arrived near Bhishma, who was surrounded by sages. Shanti Parva CE 53 17 to 27, GP 53 17 to 28. Vaishampayan Uvacha. Tadvakyamakarnya तथा कुन्तीपुत्रो धनञ्जयः युक्तं रथवरं तस्मा आचचक्षे नरर्षभ. ततो युधिष्ठिरो राजा यमौ भीमार्जुनावपि भूतानीव समस्तानि ययुः कृष्णनिवेशनम्. आगच्छत स्वतकृष्णोऽपि पाण्डवेषु महात्मसु शैनेयसहितो धीमान्त्रथ मेवान्वपद्यत. रथस्थः संविदं कृत्वा सुखां पृष्ट्वा च शर्वरीं. मेघघौषे रथवरैः प्रययुस्ते महारथः. मेघपुष्पं बलाहञ्च सैन्यं सुग्रीवमेव च. दारुकश्चोयदयामास वासुदेवस्य वाजिनः. ते हया वासुदेवस्य दारुकेण प्रचोदितः गां खुराग्रैस्तथा राजं लिखितः प्रययुस्तदा. ते ग्रसन्त इवाकाशं वेगवन्तो महाबलः क्षेत्रं धर्मस्य कृत्स्नस्य कुरुक्षेत्रमवातरन्. ततो युयुर्यत्र भीष्मः शरतल्पगतः प्रभुः आस्ते ब्रह्मर्षिभिः सार्धं ब्रह्मा देवगणैर्यथा. ततोऽवतीर्य गोविन्दो रथात् स च युधिष्ठिरः भीमो गाण्डीवधन्वा च यमौ सात्यकिरेव च. ऋषीन् अभ्यर्चयामासुः करानुद्यम्य दक्षिणान्. सतैः परिवृतो राजा नक्षत्रैरिव चन्द्रमः. अभ्याजगां गाण्डेय ब्रह्माणमिव वासवः. शरतल्पे शयानं तमादित्यं पतितं यथा ददर्श स महाबाहुर् अभयादागत साध्वसः. Bhishma began responding to queries of Yudhishthira and instructed Yudhishthira on Rajadharma. When Yudhishthira noticed that the sun had moved towards the western horizon, he asked Bhishma for permission to leave. On the way to Hastinapura, they bathed in Drishtavati river, conducted their dhyana and japa, and then reached Hastinapura. Shanti Parva CE 58 27 to 30, GP 58 27 to 30. Tato deenamina Bhishma uvacha kuru sattamah netrabhyam ashrupurnabhyam पादौ तस्य शनैः स्पृशन्. श्व इदानीं स्वसन्देहं प्रक्ष्यामि त्वं पितामह उपैति सविताप्यस्तं रसमापीय पार्थिवम्. ततो द्विजातीनभिवाद्य केशवः कृपश्च ते चैव युधिष्ठिरायः प्रदक्षिणीकृत्य महानदीसुतं ततो रथानां रुरुहुर्मुदायुतः दृशद्वती चाप्य वगाय सुव्रतः कृतोदकार्याः कृतजप्यमण्डला उपास्य सन्ध्यां विधिवत् परन्तपाः स्ततः पुरन्ते विविशुर्गजार्यम् 3.2.3 54th day before Bhishma Nirvana. The next day, the Pandava brothers along with Krishna and Satyaki left for Kurukshetra and arrived near Bhishma. Shanti Parva CE 59:1-3 GP 59:1-3. ततः काल्यं समुत्थाय कृतपौर्वारिकक्रियाः ययुस्ते नगराकार्यै रथैः पाण्डवयादवः प्रपद्य च कुरुक्षेत्रं भीष्ममासाद्य चानघं सुखां च रजनी पृष्ट्वा गाण्डेयं रथिनां वरं व्यासादीनभिवाद्यर्षि सर्वैस्तैश्चाभिनन्दितः निषेधूरभितो भीष्मं परिवार्य समन्ततः. After a long discussion that covered multiple subjects, the Mahabharata narrations thankfully informs us that Yudhishthira and the party left for Hastinapura, where Yudhishthira continued his discussions with his brothers. We would estimate this day as the end of day 54. Shanti Parva CE 161:1 GP 167:1. इत्युक्तवती भीष्मे तु तूष्णीम्भूते युधिष्ठिरः पप्रच्छावसरं गत्वा भ्रातॄन् विदुरपञ्चमान्. Yudhishthira had a long discussion with his brothers. He praised them at the end of the discussions and then went back to Bhishma to ask further questions. We estimate this as the end of day 54 before Bhishma Nirvana. That is, when he held discussions with his brothers in Hastinapura. Shanti Parva CE 161:48 GP 167:50 and 51. सुचारुवर्णाक्षर शब्दभूषितां मनोनुगां निर्दुतवाक्यकण्टकां निशम्यतां पार्थिव पार्थभाषितां गिरं नरेन्द्रः प्रशशं सुरैवते पुनश्च पप्रच्छ सरिद्वरासुतं ततः परं धर्ममहीन सत्वः. 3.2.4 53rd day before Bhishma Nirvana. Yudhishthira went back to Bhishma and began asking him questions. Shanti Parva CE 162:1 and GP 168:1. Pitamaha Mahaprajna Kurunam Kirtivardhana Prashnam Kashchitat Pravakshyami Tanme Vyakhyatumarhasi. We do not have specific descriptions of Yudhishthira and his brothers returning to Hastinapura at the end of the 53rd day before Bhishma Nirvana. 3.2.5 52nd day before Bhishma Nirvana. We do not have descriptions of the arrival at Kurukshetra and the departure for Hastinapura by Yudhishthira and his party for the 52nd day before Bhishma Nirvana. However, we have conclusive evidence for its existence due to other chronology narrations. 3.2.6 51st day before Bhishma Nirvana. Yudhishthir went back to Bhishma and began asking questions. अनुष्ठान पर्व GP 110:1. शरतल्पगतं भीष्मं वृद्धं कुरु पितामहम् उपगम्य महाप्राज्ञः पर्यपृच्छ युधिष्ठिरः. We do know that these descriptions refer to Yudhishthir's arrival at Kurukshetra on the 51st day before Bhishma Nirvana because he was accompanied by Dhritarashtra. Anushasan Parva CE 112:6-7 GP 111:6-7. तयोः संवदतोरेवं पार्थगाण्डेययोस्तदा आजगां विशुद्धात्मा भगवान् स बृहस्पतिः. ततो राजा समुत्थाय धृतराष्ट्रपुरोगमः पूजामनुपमां चक्रे सर्वे ते च सभासदः. On this day, Bhishma recited 1000 names in praise of Krishna, which is now known as Vishnu Sahasranama. Bhishma continued explaining and responding to other questions of Yudhishthira and then became silent. When Vyasa noticed that Bhishma had become silent, he turned to Bhishma and told him that Yudhishthira had returned to his normal state and that Bhishma should give permission to Yudhishthira, his brothers, Krishna and others to return to Hastinapura. Anushasan Parva CE 152:1-3 and GP 166:4-7. तूष्णीं भूते तदा भीष्मे पटे चित्रमिवार्पितं मुहूर्तमिव च ध्यात्वा व्यासः सत्यवती सुतः। नृपं शयानं गाण्डेय मिदमाह वचस्तदा राजन् प्रकृतिमापन्नः कुरुराजो युधिष्ठिरः सहितो भ्रातृभिः सर्वैः पार्थिवैश्चानुयायिभिः उपास्ते त्वां नरव्याघ्रसः कृष्णेन धीमता तमीं पुरयानाय त्वमनुज्ञातुमर्हसि। Bhishma made his parting remarks to Yudhishthira and specifically asked Yudhishthira to return only when the sun turned north. Anushasan Parva CE 152:10 and GP 166:14. Agantavyam cha bhavata samaye mama parthiva vinivrutte dinakare pravrutte chottarayane. Yudhishthira agreed to the instructions of Bhishma, paid his obeisances and then left for Hastinapura. He soon entered Hastinapura in the company of his brothers Krishna, Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, sages, his ministers and citizens of his kingdom. Anushasan Parva CE 152 11-13 GP 166 15-17. Tathetyukta tu kaunteyaha sobhivadya pitamaham prayayau सपरिवारो नगरम नागसारयम धृतराष्ट्रं पुरस्कृत्य गांधारी च पत्तिव्रतां सहतैर्ऋषिभिः सर्वैर्भ्रातृभिः केशवेन च पौरजानपदैश्चैव मन्त्रिवृद्धैश्च पार्थिवः प्रविवेश कुरुश्रेष्ठ पुरं वारणसार्यम्. This was the end of the 6th day long Bhishma Yudhishthira Samvada. 3.3 The day of Bhishma Nirvana. Upon his return to Hastinapura, Yudhishthira honored the citizens of Hastinapura and his kingdom and then asked them to return to their homes. He compensated with distribution of wealth women of his kingdom who had lost either their husbands or children. Anushasan Parva CE 153 1-2 GP 167 1-2. Tatah Kunti Suto Raja Paurajanpadam Janam पूजयित्वा यथान्याय मनुजज्ञे गृहान् प्रति सान्त्वयामास नारीश्च हतवीरा हतेश्वरः विपुलैरर्थदानैश्च तथा पाण्डुसुतो नृपः. Yudhishthira spent 50 nights in Hastinapura and then when the sun turned north he left Hastinapura with his associates for Kurukshetra to meet Bhishma. Anushthan Parva CE 153 5-6 GP 167 5-6. Ushitva Sharvarihi Shriman Panchashana Nagarottame Samayam Kauravagrasya Sasmara Purusharshabha Saniryayo Gajapuradhyajakaihi Parivaritaha Drashtva Nivruttamaadityam Pravrittam Chottarayanam. The fact that Yudhishthira spent 50 nights in Hastinapura allows us to estimate the duration of Bhishma Yudhishthira Samvada to be equal to 6 days. The Mahabharata text is silent on the exact duration between the arrival of Yudhishthira from the bank of the Ganga river to Hastinapura and his first meeting with Bhishma at Kurukshetra. Let's make this unknown duration equal to X days. We do know based on Mahabharata text that there was at least one night spent at Hastinapura before Yudhishthira went to see Bhishma. This means the minimum value for X is equal to 1. We can summarize the details for the duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows. Yudhishthira carried things necessary for Bhishma's Agni Samskara along with him. Anushasan Parva CE 153 7-8 GP 167 7-8. Ghrutam malyam cha gandhascha क्षौमाणि च युधिष्ठिरः चन्दनागरुमुख्यानि तथा कालागरुणि च प्रस्थाप्य पूर्वं कौन्तेयो भीष्म संसाधनाय वै माल्यानि च महार्हाणि रत्नानि विविधानि च. Yudhishthira was accompanied by Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti, Pandava brothers, Krishna, Vidura, Yuyutsu, Satyaki and others. Anushasan Parva CE 153 9-10 GP 167 9 and 10. Dhritarashtram puraskrutyam Gandharicham yashasvinim mataram cha prutham dhiman bhratruncha purushar shabha janardanena nugato vidurena cha dhimata Yuyutsana cha kauravyo yuyudhanena chabhibho. The praises were sung for those royal personalities as they arrived near Bhishma at Kurukshetra. Various sages, including Vyasa, Narada, Asita, Deval, and others, were sitting next to Bhishma. Warriors who had arrived from various places and who survived through the Mahabharata war were protecting Bhishma from all sides. Yudhishthira got down from the chariot along with his brothers, approached Bhishma, paid his obeisances, and told Bhishma that he had arrived at the right time along with Dhritarashtra, Krishna, as well as the citizens of Kuru kingdom. Anushasan Parva CE 153 11-22 GP 167 11-22 महता राजभोग्येन परिबर्हेण संवृतः स्तूयमानो महाराज भीष्मस्याग्निन् अनुव्रजन् निश्चक्राम पुरा तस्माद्यथा देवपतिस्तथा आससाद कुरुक्षेत्रे ततः शान्तनवं नृपम् उपास्यमानं व्यासेन पाराशर्येण धीमता नारदेन च राजर्षे देवलेनासितेन च हतशिष्टैर्नृपैश्चान्येन नानादेशसमागतैः रक्षिभिक्षमाहात्मानं रक्षमाणं समन्ततः शयानं वीरशयने ददर्श नृपतिस्ततः तत्तो रथाद्वारोहद्भातृभिः सह धर्मराट् अभिवाद्याथ कौन्तेयः पितामहं हृदं मम द्वैपानादीन् विप्रांश्च तैश्च प्रत्यभिनन्दितः ऋत्विग्भिर्ब्रह्मकल्पेश भ्रातृभिश्च सहाच्युतः आसाद्य शरतल्पस्थं ऋषिभिः परिवारितम् अब्रवीद भरतश्रेष्ठं धर्मराजो युधिष्ठिरः भ्रातृभिः सह कौरव्य शयानं निम्मगासुतम् युधिष्ठिरोऽहं नृपते नमस्ते जाह्नवीसुत शृणोषि चेन्महाबाहो ब्रूहि किं करवाणि ते प्राप्तोऽस्मि समये राजन्नग्नि दायदे विभो आचार्य ब्राह्मणाश्चैव ऋत्विजो भ्रातरश्च मे पुत्रश्च ते महातेजा धृतराष्ट्रो जनीश्वरः उपस्थितः सहामात्यो वासुदेवश्च वीर्यवान् हतशिष्टाश्च राजानः सर्वे च कुरुजाङ्गला तान् पश्य कुरुशार्दूल समुन्मीलय लोचने. Bhishma opened his eyes and noticed everyone who was surrounding him and then held hands of Yudhishthira. Anushasan Parva CE 153 24 and 25 GP 167 24-25 एव मुक्तं गाण्डेय कुन्तिपुत्रं धीमता ददर्श भारतान् सर्वान् स्थिता संपरिवार्य तम ततश्चलवलिर्भीष्मः प्रगृह्य विपुलम्भुजम् ओघमेघस्वनो वाग्मी काले वचनमब्रवीत्. Bhishma told Yudhishthira that it was indeed fortunate that Yudhishthira had arrived along with his ministers and that the sun had turned to the north. Anushasan Parva CE 153-26 GP 167-26 दिष्ट्या प्राप्तोऽसि कौन्तेय सहमात्यो युधिष्ठिर परिवृत्तो हि भगवान् सहस्रांशुर्दिवाकरः. What Bhishma said next is rather trivial for establishing or contradicting the total duration of Bhishma lying on the bed of arrows. On the other hand, these two verses of Mahabharata text have confused all Mahabharata researchers. These two verses and their confused interpretation, coupled with utter ignorance about the logic of scientific method on the part of Mahabharata researchers, has created enormous confusion regarding the chronology of the Mahabharata war. We will return to these two verses, analyze their details, and analyze illogical works of numerous Mahabharata researchers in chapter 10, Conflicting Observations. Bhishma told Yudhishthira that the period of past 58 nights of lying on the bed of arrows was tiresome, and Bhishma felt as if he was lying there for 100 years. Bhishma further stated that it appeared to him that it was the lunar month of Magha, that either 1/3 or 1/4 of Paksha or month had elapsed or remaining. Anushasan Parva CE 153 27-28 GP 167 27-28 अष्टपश्चाशतं रात्र्यः शयानस्याद्यमे गतः शरेषु निशिताग्रेषु यथा वर्षशतं तथा माघोऽयं समनुप्राप्तो मासः पुण्यो युधिष्ठिरा त्रिभागशेषः पक्षोऽयं शुक्लो भवितुमर्हति. Bhishma then called Dhritarashtra near him and asked him to give up all sadness and to treat the Pandavas as his own. Bhishma then asked Krishna for his permission for Bhishma to leave his body. Then turning to Yudhishthira, he said his parting words and became silent. Anushasan Parva CE 153 29 to 50, GP 167 29 to 52. एवं उक्ता तु गाण्डेयो धर्मपुत्रं युधिष्ठिरं धृतराष्ट्रमथामन्त्र्य काले वचनमब्रवीत्। राजन् विदितधर्मोऽसि सुनिर्णितार्थसंशयः बहुश्रुता हिते विप्रा बहवः पर्युपासितः। वेदशास्त्राणि सर्वाणि धर्मांश्च मनुजेश्वर वेदांश्च चतुरः सांग निखिले नाव बुध्यसे। न शोचितव्यं कौरव्य भवितव्यं हि तत्तथा श्रुतं देव रहस्यं ते कृष्णद्वैपायनादपि। यथा पाण्डोः सुता राजंस्तथैव तव धर्मतः तान्मालय स्थितो धर्मे गुरुशुश्रूषणे रतान्। धर्मराजो हि शुद्धात्मा निदेशे स्थास्यते तव। आन्दृश्यस्य परं ह्येनं जानामि गुरुवत्सलं। तव पुत्रा दुरात्मानः क्रोधलोभपरायणः ईर्ष्याभिभूता दुर्वृत्तस्तान् शोचितुमर्हसि। वैशम्पायन उवाच एतावदुक्त्वा वचनं धृतराष्ट्रं मनीषिणं वासुदेवं महाबाहुम् अभ्यतभाषत कौरवः। भगवन् देवदेवेश सुरासुर नमस्कृत त्रिविक्रम नमस्तेतु शंखचक्र गदाधर। अनुजानीहि मां कृष्ण वैकुण्ठपुरुषोत्तम रक्ष्याश्च ते पाण्डवेया भवान्नेषा परायणम्। उक्तवानस्मि दुर्बुद्धिं मन्दं दुर्योधनं पुरा यतः कृष्णस्ततो धर्मो यतो धर्मस्ततो जयः। वासुदेवेन तीर्थेन पुत्रसंशाम्य पाण्डवैः सन्धानस्य परः कालस्तवेति च पुनः पुनः। न च मे तद्वचो मूढः कृतवांस सुमन्ददिः घातयित्वेष पृथिवीं ततः स निधनं गतः। त्वाञ्च जानाम्यहं वीर पुराणमृषिसत्तमं नरेण सहितं देवं बदर्यां सुचिरोषितम्। तथा मे नारदः प्राह व्यासश्च सुमहातपः नरनारायणावेतौ सम्भूतो मनुजेष्विति। वासुदेव उवाच अनुजानामि भीष्म त्वां वसूनाप्नुहि पार्थव न तेऽस्ति वृजिनं किश्चिन् मया दृष्टं महाद्युते। पितृभक्तोऽसि राजर्षे मार्कण्डेय इवापरः तेन मृत्युस्तव वशे स्थितो भृत्य इवानतः। वैशम्पायन उवाच एवमुक्तस्तु गाण्डेय पाण्डवानिदमब्रवीत् धृतराष्ट्रमुखांश्चापि सर्वान् सुहृदस्तथा। प्राणानुस्त्रष्टुमिच्छामि तन्मानुज्ञातुमर्हत सत्ये प्रयतितव्यं वः सत्यं हि परं बलम्। आनृशंस्य परैर्भार्व्यं सदैव नियतात्मभिः ब्रह्मण्यै धर्मशीलश्च तपोनित्यैश्च भारत। इत्युक्त्वा सुहृदः सर्वान् सम्परिष्वज्य चैवः पुनरेवाब्रवीद्धिमान्यो युधिष्ठिरमिदं वचः। ब्राह्मणाश्चैव ते नित्यं प्राज्ञाश्चैव विशेषतः आचार्य ऋत्विजश्चैव पूजनीया नराधिप। Bhishma focused internally and began releasing his prana and became one with the universe. Anushasan Parva CE 154 1 to 7, GP 168 1 to 9. एवमुक्त्वा कुरुन् सर्वान् भीष्मः शान्तनवस्तदा तूष्णीवभूव कौरव्यः स मुहूर्तमरिन्दम्। धारयामास चात्मानं धारणासु यथाक्रमं तस्य ऊर्ध्वं मगं प्राणः सन्निरुद्धा महात्मनः। इदमाश्चर्यमासीच्च मध्ये तेषां महात्मनां यदन्मुच्यति गात्राणां स शन्तनु सुतस्तदा तत्तद्विशल्यं भवति योगयुक्तस्य तस्य वै। क्षणेन प्रेषतां तेषां विशल्यः सोऽभवदत्ता। त्वं दृष्ट्वा विस्मिताः सर्वे वासुदेव पुरोगमः सह तैर्मुनिभिः सर्वेस्तदा व्यासानिभिर्नृप। सर्वेष्वायतनेषु वै जगाम्भित्वा मूर्धानं दिवमभ्युत्पपात च। महाल्केव च भीष्मश्च मूर्धदेशात् जनाधिप निःसृत्याकाशमाविश्य क्षणेनान्तरधीयत। एवं स नृपशार्दूल नृपः शान्तनवस्तदा समयुज्यत लोकैः स्वैर्भतानां कुलोद्वहः। Vidura, Yuyutsu and the Pandava brothers created a pyre using wood and perfumes while the rest of the crowd watched. Yudhishthira and Vidura covered Bhishma with flower garlands, a silk cloth, and placed his body on the pyre. Anushasan Parva CE 154 8-9, GP 168 10-12. ततस्त्वादाय दारुणि गन्धाश्च विविधान् बहुन् चितां चक्रुर्महात्मानः पाण्डवा विदुरस्तथा युयुत्सुश्चापि कौरव्याः प्रेक्षकास्तिवरे भवन युधिष्ठिरस्तु गाण्डेय विदुरश्च महामतिः चादयामास तुरुभौ क्षौमे मालैश्च कौरवम्. The Pandava brothers and the Kuru women also participated in various ways. The Pandavas performed Pitrumedha and offered many oblations to the Agni. And while Samagana continued, Dhritarashtra lit the pyre. All present did parikrama around Bhishma. Anushasan Parva CE 154 10-14, GP 168 13-17. Dharayamasa tasyath yuyutsusha chhatramuttamam चामरव्यजने शुभ्रे भीमसेनार्जुना उभौ उष्णैषे पर्यगृहीतां माद्रिपुत्रा उभौ तदा. स्त्रियः कौरनाथस्य भीष्मं कुरुकुलोद्भवं तालवृन्तान्युपादाय पर्यविजन् समन्ततः. ततोऽस्य विधिवच्चक्रुः पितृमेधं महात्मनः याजकाजुः उष्याग्निं जगुः सामानि सामगः. ततश्चन्दनकाष्ठैश्च यथा कालेयकैरपि कालागरुप्रभृतिभिर्गं दैश्चोच्चावस्तैस्तथा. समवच्छाद्य गाण्डेय प्रज्वाल्य च दाशनम् अपसव्यं कुर्वन्त धृतराष्ट्र मुखानृपः. After this, they all went to the bank of the river Ganga and did Jalakriya for Bhishma and then returned to Hastinapura. Anushasan Parva CE 154 15-17, GP 168 18-20. संस्कृत्य कुरुश्रेष्ठं गाण्डेयं कुरुसत्तमः जग्मुर्भागीरथी तीरं ऋषिजुष्टं कुरुद्वहः. अनुगम्यमाना व्यासेन नारदेनासितेन च कृष्णेन भरतस्त्रिभिर्ये च पौराः समागताः. उदकं चक्रिरे चैव गाण्डेयस्य महात्मनः विधिवत् क्षत्रियश्रेष्ठाः स च सर्वो जनस्तदा. Summary. A crisp and clear timeline for the events of Bhishma Nirvana can be gleaned from the Mahabharata text. 1. Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for more than 92 days. We will use 92 as a lower limit in estimating the constraints related to the events of Bhishma Nirvana. 2. Bhishma fell in the battle on the 10th day of the war and since then was on the bed of arrows until the day of winter solstice. The war continued for additional 8 days. Number 3. Yudhishthira and his party spent a month-long interval on the bank of the river Ganga after the war was over and before returning to Hastinapura. Number 4. In Hastinapura, Yudhishthira was coronated as the king and then went to meet Bhishma. It is on this day that Krishna told Bhishma that Bhishma had 56 more days to live. Number 5. Yudhishthira visited Bhishma every day for 6 consecutive days, during which Bhishma advised him on various subjects of Rajadharma and Mokshadharma. Bhishma recited Vishnu Sahasranama to all present on the 6th and the last day and then asked Yudhishthira to return to Hastinapura and only come back to him when the sun turned north, that is after the day of the winter solstice. Number 6. Yudhishthira returned to Hastinapura and stayed there for 50 nights before returning to Bhishma. Bhishma passed away on that day. The story continues in chapter 4.